Hi and welcome to another video from the CTAG Clinic. My name's Dr. Mike Lloyd and I'm the Clinic Director. And in the video today I'm going to be looking at another subscriber question, and this is related to having relationships with people whilst also having DID, Dissociative Identity Disorder. This also applies to other specified dissociative disorder, also known as OSDD. The question that was posed by Covey is this: in a serious long-term relationship while having DID, how does our partner build relationships with each alter? How to communicate effectively when dissociation is such a strong factor in daily life? How to handle intimacy, etc. And I really like this question because this is something that crops up time and time again within our clinical practice. And the way I'm going to approach this is with 10 things. So there are 10 real concepts to take into account when thinking about having a partner, having DID, and how it all works. Obviously, these 10 points are not going to be exhaustive. There will be many more, but these are the 10 that we've picked up through clinical practice, through discussions with people and their partners, because sometimes partners join the therapy sessions, and this gives us a bit of an understanding about how this can work out. And we try as best as possible to make it as unique and individual as possible. So some of these factors might not apply to everybody, some of them might not apply at all. It depends on a range of factors. So before I get into the 10 steps really to consider, let's look at some of the factors that this depends on as to whether it might work at all. So firstly, it's required that the partner has knowledge of the OSDD or DID of the person. This means that the system would need to be fairly clear or fairly known to both, because obviously this is going to be very difficult if the person has internal parts and the partner is not aware of any of it. The degree to which communication and contact can take place is going to be fairly haphazard. So this is about systems that are quite well known to both. And obviously these things can take place within therapy settings where this would be advised so that the therapist can work with both the person and the partner to try and understand how this works. I suppose the last one is also that the person is the person, that I'm using that term for simplicity. There are many complicating factors around this that might mean that this is viewed very differently. So for example, the person or the host might be one of many different persons or hosts, and it can be quite complicated. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to look at it in the simplistic version possible, which is there is a person who has DID or OSDD, and there is a partner, and to try and work it out between them. So of the 10 things then, I suppose the first one is that the partner and the internal system have given permission for the partner to be involved. This might seem like a really obvious one, but it is always necessary to ask. So asking permission for these things, to know the names, for example, of the parts, to have permission to use those names to address parts and the person within the names that they choose, is the first point. Because without that, it becomes very difficult because the person doesn't really know who they're talking to or what might be going on at any time. So permission for that system to be clear, to be open, to be known, and names to be used, that's the first point. Second point is that there's a degree of predictability about switching, that a person is able to identify what might happen in certain places, can help the partner understand that this is about to happen. Chances are so-and-so are going to turn up. So it could be around meal times, it could be around bedtimes, it could be around certain activities that are taking place like play or TV or employment or education, whatever it might be, is the person is able to indicate to the partner, here's what might happen in those circumstances, here's who you might see. That predictive quality, again, sounds very simple, is actually very important. Third one is that there should be some boundaries set on the speech and the behaviour of internal parts or alters. What we're not looking at here is an absolute free-for-all. There has to be some boundaries on behaviour. So certain parts may be allowed to do certain things and not allowed to do certain things. If the partner is involved with those parts, as with any sort of joint parenting system, is that there has to be consistency of boundaries and approach to those parts between both the person and the partner. And that's always worth sort of listing out, agreeing, so the partner is able to say, if so-and-so turns up and does a certain thing, here's how I'd like you to deal with it. If I'm not present and I can't deal with it, here's the steps that I'd like you to take. So that behaviour is consistent, is understood, and is boundaried. The fourth one is that there needs to be some sort of willingness or agreement about how to share information. So that if a partner interacts with an alter and the person then returns 10 minutes later, what is allowed to be shared? So is the information that's come from that alter able to be shared with the person when they return? This is quite important, because what we don't want is there to be a holding of secrets. So the alters start telling the partner things that the person doesn't know. That's going to create problems if the partner is not allowed to tell the person about that stuff. Obviously, a little bit of intuition is implied that some things an alter might say, the partner might go, you know what, I don't think that's a particularly good idea to share with a person. That's going to upset them or distress them, or that's things that they really don't need to know at this moment, but I'll hold it and I'll share it later. That's reasonable, I think, under those circumstances. But generally, I think the partner has to be aware and be able to sort of list off what's happened. So in the 20 minutes since you were gone, here's who showed up, here's what they did, here's how I managed it, just so you know. And certainly if things have been done, if food's been eaten, if things have been moved around, or if stuff has happened, when the person returns, the partner is able to share that information. So they work as a team in terms of information sharing. The next one is that there really should be some agreed participation limits. So again, it's about agreement between the person and the partner. So when the partner is communicating, or when they see the behavior of parts, is that they understand what the limits of behavior are. And this can be examples of things like spending. If they're aware that parts are coming out in supermarkets and they're trying to buy things or take things out of the shop, that the partner is able to intervene within that boundary, know who it is, have an understanding behavior, be very politeful, be very respectful, but stop that behavior from taking place. Another example, as Covey mentioned, is about intimacy. So if there's intimacy between the person and the partner and an alter then emerges, that might not be appropriate for that intimacy to continue. Now, you don't want there to be no intimacy ever between the person and the partner if that's what they want in their lives. It's just that there has to be some degree of rules. So, for example, the obvious point is that if there is some intimacy, physical intimacy taking place, a child alter appears, it's no longer appropriate for that intimacy to continue. Therefore, the partner has to interact with the child part to be able to bring the person back and have the child part sort of moving away and not present during that interaction, because that's not appropriate, and that could be highly triggering, it could be really scary, or it's just not pleasant for either the person or the partner to have that taking place. Another aspect of this, is that I think it's useful for the partner to refer to the person's name wherever possible. So assuming again there is a name that is used and that is taken and that is understood, that is referred to. So if a person dissociates and a part is present and the partner is talking to that part, that alter, that they're able to refer to the person's name wherever possible, either to bring that person back in or just make it very clear that this isn't a one-to-one arrangement. This is a partner talking to an alter, and that person is there either in the background, foreground or background, and that the name should be used, so that it's clear that the partner is always making it clear to the alter that they know that the person is present and may need to be there. So having that as a reference point is always a useful thing. Again, it might seem like something really obvious, but it needs to be quite a deliberate factor in the way that its communication is undertaken. I think it's also important that traumatic memory is probably not shared during these phases. So unless it's within a very supportive, organised or therapeutic setting, the sharing of traumatic personal history from an alter to the partner may not be appropriate, and there may need to be some limits and rules on that. Again, if an alter is coming through and starting to talk about traumatic stuff that might have happened in their sense, and it could be quite live for them because they may not be aware of where they are or what time they're in, that could be very distressing for the partner. It might be things that the partner isn't aware of, and therefore it could be also things that the person isn't aware of, and that information sharing becomes very, very complicated and problematic. So I think it's important if an alter is coming through and sharing traumatic memory with the partner kind of very gently goes, it's not really good idea for me to hear this stuff right now. I think maybe if you can't look after yourself, or if you can't handle this traumatic memory, it might be best if you go back inside and so come back out. Or how about we distract, we avoid that conversation, we move on to other things we can do, but please do not share that memory, do not share that information with me, because it's not something that I wish to hold. It all depends on the nature of the relationship between the person and the partner and what they've agreed, but this can be quite a difficult area. There might be some boundaries between the person and the partner about where these interactions take place. So let's say at home, it might be completely fine for the partner to interact with alters and parts, but maybe out and about in public transport or in streets or in shops or in workplaces, that might not be so appropriate, so that the partner and the person are aware of what is okay and what is not okay depending on where they might be or what company they might be in. So for example, it might be fine for that interaction to take place person, alter, partner, but if extended family or friends are around or it's a big social occasion, then that might not be a good idea. And to have agreements on how alters are spoken to according to which parts might come out. Could be that a child alter comes out wanting to play, but it's a social setting like a pub or a restaurant or a bar, and the partner is able to say to the child alter, I'm sorry, but you can't really be here at the moment, so what I need is so-and-so to come back in, take you back, look after you so that we can continue, and I need the person to come back so we can engage. And that might need to be done very quietly and very discreetly, depending on the circumstances. One of the last points then is about there should be some sort of participation within meetings, so that there's nothing wrong with there being like a group format. So we often talk about joint meetings being useful for people with OSDD and DID, with a person to be able to manage their internal system in a very kind of organised and vocal and respectful way. The partner can be brought into that, so that if there are problems or if there are decisions that need to take place or choices that need to be had, then the person and the partner are both involved within that, looking at the internal system, understanding it between them. So wherever possible, the opportunities for joint practice take place, so that then later on down the line or on another day, when the partner is alone with an alter, they kind of know what's going on. They are into the understanding and the setup of the system with all the rules and the boundaries, the agreements, the permissions, all of those things. The partner is involved within all of those things. It's obviously quite time consuming to do all this stuff, but in the context of a long-term relationship, this is what is needed when there is a condition like dissociation present. It would be no more different than, say, in physical health settings when the partner is required to do a lot of physical care for the person. This is the same, it's just on a mental health level rather than the physical health level. And lastly, I think it's important that the philosophy of the partner to approach this is done in a sense of trying to develop the person's ability to do it for themselves. What I don't think is all that helpful, it's okay in the short term, but in the long term, when we think about the healing, the recovery process through dissociation, that the partner doesn't do it for the person, they do it alongside them. So wherever possible, the partner is trying to improve the skills of the person to be able to do this work. One of the dangerous aspects or one of the traps that a person can fall into is that the parts, the alters, don't like working with the person, but they do like working with the partner. So they come out, they interact with the partner loads and loads and loads, but they have nothing to do with the person. They don't like the person, they ignore them, they are maybe hostile towards them, but the partner is the most amazing person ever. So the partner is on the receiving end of an awful lot of dissociation and the person remains quite oblivious to it all. That's obviously not a good idea. So it's about the partner realizing that they shouldn't take on too much. They have to have their own internal safeguards and boundaries around their time, their energy, their emotional limits, but to make sure wherever possible that their interaction with the alters is geared towards trying to improve the interaction with the person, because that's really where the recovery from the trauma work is going to take place. And I suppose as an overarching thing is that this is ideally something that can be enjoyed. It can be very stressful. It can feel very, very unpleasant and very difficult for the person and the partner at times. If it's managed well, there can be a lot of enjoyment. As in therapy, there's often a lot of humour, a lot of fun that takes place in therapy, even in the context of the most awful traumas that might have happened. And these interactions between the partner, the alters, and the person, those can be fun and enjoyable. I want the partners to feel that they belong within this, that they have a degree of autonomy and choice about this, and to take it not as a chore or a burden, but as a sort of a joyful enterprise that they can take part in, because it can be really wonderful. It can be a lot of fun. remains to be seen. Obviously, as I said, these things don't apply to everybody, and some people might be better at some things than they are at others. Please don't worry about that. It's an entirely individual, unique thing. So this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. This is something that can be applied in many different ways to many different relationships, which take all forms. So it's more looking at this as general constructs to see which ones fit, to see which ones apply. That's the best way of approaching these things. So I hope that this one has been okay. It's a great question. Thank you very much, Covey. I've devoted an entire video to this one because this has been asked a few times previously. So I thought this is a nice opportunity to throw all the stuff, all my thoughts down on one video so that you can have a look at it all. So yeah, please, as always, please do leave comments in the comment section below the video. Like, subscribe, feel free to share the videos if you have forums or people you want to share them with. That's wonderful. I love the fact that people are doing that, and we'll keep producing content for you to enjoy as we go along. So between now and the next video, please do take great care.